The International Association for Near-Death Studies presents NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting. Our guest today, Dustin Warncke, plays an important role at NDE Radio as the volunteer technical expert facilitating our Facebook page. Dustin, along with volunteer associate producer Lilia Samoilo, who provides the Facebook content, are the admin gurus who make our Facebook presence possible and leading our listeners, hopefully, to our YouTube channel as well. And well beyond NDE Radio's Facebook page, Dustin keeps incredibly busy. Dustin has served as a motivational speaker, devotional leader, and master teacher, working with numerous individuals, small businesses, and organizations, helping them achieve their goals and turn their dreams into reality. He earned a bachelor's degree from Texas Lutheran University in 2002 and became an avid outdoorsman and an authority in sales and marketing with a specialization in the outdoor industry. As such, he has produced and hosted hundreds of YouTube videos and TV shows, as well as biweekly podcasts, and authored paperback books, ebooks, blogs, and feature articles for regional and national print and online publications. Dustin's goal in all this is to inspire others, and especially veterans, to do great things in life through service to others while living with love, joy, purpose, meaning, and significance. His new book, titled An Intentional Optimized Life, Finding Meaning in God's Plan, draws on his own encounters with God through inspirational dreams and a recent NDE. You can learn more about Dustin's books, articles, blogs, videos, outdoor TV show productions, and podcasts at www.dustinsprojects.com. Dustin, welcome to NDE Radio.
It is an honor to be here. This is wonderful.
It's wonderful to have you on finally. Dustin, I found your new book to be quite an inspiration. And today I thought we might explore how you gained your own motivation for accomplishing all you've done so far. You were raised in the evangelical Lutheran denomination, but your childhood was not without difficulty since your parents divorced when you were young. How did that affect your growing up?
So that's a great question. There was a lot of division and those kind of things in the family, fighting and whatnot. And I always knew, though, that love was the constant tie that binded. Like, it was the one thing that kept us together in hope and meaning in life was love being the most important thing. I'll always remember that about my childhood, which is a great thing.
That's a wonderful thing. That's a key element in growing up for sure. When you were a teenager, you had a vision of Jesus, brilliant in white light, surrounded by wild animals. You said deer, birds, flora and fauna of all kinds. Tell us about that. Tell us what you saw.
So I was going through a period of my life of a lot of self-doubt. And, as teenagers a lot of times do, was kind of questioning my salvation and questioning, God and Jesus and how all this stuff worked together. And basically what I did was pray to God, show me a sign, I'm not sure. And, I kind of half-heartedly did that. I wasn't expecting anything. And at night, I had kind of a dreamlike state of Jesus Christ appearing to me. And the words came from above. They came from outside, that like telepathically, like so many spiritually transformative experiences are. And the words were, I am neither ahead of you nor behind you. And I awoke and thought to myself, goodness, what does that mean? I was confused at first, but I had a feeling of peace that went beyond all human understanding. This just peace of love and light and meaning that was really drove home everything that was going to be okay. I just knew that everything was going to be fine. And that I was a child of God. Like, I knew that at the end of that experience. And I realized what Jesus was saying to me is, I'm neither ahead of you or behind you. I am with you. Mm-hmm. And that's what I interpreted that to mean.
There's that old story about walking footprints in the sand and Jesus walking beside you and then possibly carrying you. Do you see Jesus neither ahead nor behind, but beside you or within you?
That's a great question, Lee. So basically, I would say beside me and within me. I would say both. I think that's a fantastic way of looking at it. But I really feel like incarnate, we have it inside of us, that spirituality that we are all things and all things are within us, and the spiritual way of looking at that. But also the fact that things are, basically, in a way, things are as they should be. And I'll get to that more later in our talk. But basically, I just felt a reassurance that everything was going to be all right. And Jesus was with me always. And that was profound. And that was a profound moment in my life that I will never forget.
Well, also the business about the wild animals. Tell us about that. What animals did you see? And I mean, this must have seemed terribly prophetic when you think back that you've been all involved in nature and the outdoors.
It was, and I think about the drawing the relative, part of the fact that there was the animals, but I saw birds, flora and fauna, like you said in your description of it. I saw axis deer, which are spotted. They look like whitetail fawns, but they had spots on them. I definitely remember a deer that was spotted, and it turns out later in life I would live sell axis deer and those kind of things in the future. So it was kind of prophetic in that respect. But rabbits and all kinds of animals, I just knew that Jesus loved wildlife, and that's, I think, maybe one of the things that drove me towards part of my career that I spent in wildlife, hunting and fishing, and those kind of interactions with wildlife, was that experience. Because I knew that Jesus loved those things. Yes.
Well, I've always said that, and recently did a pet therapy blessing of the animals on St. Francis Day. But I don't think I have ever heard of someone envisioning Jesus or dreaming of Jesus surrounded by wild animals. I think this is a very unique vision that you had.
I was going to tell you too, Lee, my stepfather commented on your show, I believe it was last week, of the St. Francis blessing of the pets, and he loved it. So I wanted to make sure you knew that you have a new fan.
Thanks. And it's one of my favorite things as a chaplain to do was that blessing every October 4th. Well, you've had other waking dreams. I think you've called some of them veiled messages, and that you're on the right track. Tell us about some of those.
So I've awoke with a similar, gone to sleep with a doubt, awoke with a peace. And I've had these several times throughout my adult life since being a teenager. And these things are things I'll go to sleep with, and I'll be uncertain, and I'll wake up and I'll be sure. And I'll just know that God is with me and that I am doing the best I can with what I have, and making the best decisions that I can based with the resources I have available to me. And that's one reason, some people ask me, why are you so positive? And I'm just like, because I know that God's in charge. I know that life is going to work out. And the two things that I was going to say that I've learned from your show, Lee, is in the NDE Radio community, is the two facts that everything is as it should be, and that everything's going to be okay. Those are the two messages of hope that I get from your show with almost every interaction that I have with your guests. And that I have kind of a before, during, and after experience, because before I met NDE Radio on YouTube many years ago, I basically was, trying to find the meaning of all of it. And I feel later now that I've listened to so many NDE Radio experiences that I have this better understanding of why we're here and what our purpose, meaning, and significance is. And that helped me guide me down the road of writing the book that I wrote, to inspire other people to do great things in their life.
Now, you went through a period of maybe 6 or 7 years ago when you had a bouts of depression. How did you cope with that? And did some of your you're on the right track messages from Jesus help you through that?
Yes. I mean, I went through just my depression medication stopped working. Basically, it was a chemical imbalance in my brain. It was just kind of, something then, and depression is something that I think we need to bring more out into the light.
Yes.
Because it is a dark, deep, dark thing. And I think the more that we have, shed light on it, the darkness cannot hide in the light, as we know. Suicide's a big deal and those kind of things. I mean, and I've dealt with, with a lot of the feelings of hopelessness and sadness and those kind of things. And basically knowing that I was loved and knowing that God cared for me in a profound way kept me going. And actually, I wrote my first 2 ebooks during that time of depression. And I haven't told you this before, but basically, I kept going because I knew I could provide hope for somebody else going forward. Even if I couldn't provide hope to myself that day, I knew if I gave hope, it's kind of like Neil Donald Walsh would say, give of that of which you hope to receive. And that's kind of paraphrasing his words, but basically be the source of what you hope to receive.
Wow.
And so if you are missing love, give love. If you're missing money, give money. Be the hope that you're hoping to receive. And that kept me going through that time. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's a terrific answer. And that's such a valuable truth to pass on to other people who may be feeling depressed. Instead of getting all caught up in your own depression, do for others what you would hope someone would do for you in your situation, and that giving will you're being a channel for God's love, so that God's love is going to be flowing through you. Then was it just last March you had an unusual NDE? Yourself, how did that how did that come about, and what did you see in it?
So I was diagnosed in 2016 with heart failure. Nothing serious, no heart attacks or anything like that, but basically an enlarged heart and just a health condition that was related to that kind of thing. And basically I was advised by one of my heart doctors, my heart physicians, to get a defibrillator implanted. And I had that done back in February. It's on the left side of my rib cage, and basically had that done. And it tested and didn't test well. So they put me back under in late March 26, actually, of 2021. So just this past March. And they put me under, and I basically went out of it, went out of consciousness and woke up. And, Lee, when you look at like the sun or look at a light, how it's kind of ingrained in your head, like it just kind of like the image stays with you, like burned into your psyche kind of, you know what I mean?
Yes.
I woke up with the same peace that I felt when I was 15 years old. And since then, I woke up with the peace that everything was going to be okay, that everything is as it should be. I woke up with the peace that goes beyond all human understanding. And I saw a vision that was seeming to me, in what Lily has told me, maybe a veiled experience of a bronze plate with Christ's face on it, like as a reminder that I'm with you always. And I had that message to come back with, that everything's going to be okay and I'm with you. And that was it. Like, that was the extent of the experience. But for me, it turned me even to more of an altruistic, compassionate, giving person than I was before. And if you ask anybody that knows me, I would give you the shirt off my back. Like, that's the kind of guy I am. But I even more cared about giving that of which I hope to receive, of love. Just more love, and just love being the answer.
When you first told me that story, I thought the image that came to my mind was a kind of medal. And then I thought of what Oz gave the Cowardly Lion to give him courage, that this was something that Jesus was hanging around your neck to remind you always that he's right there by your heart.
Yeah, and I could see it as something. I mean, the image is still clear to me. I can't draw it or paint it, but basically, it was like a bronze plate or a bronze, like round tablet or something like that with Christ's face on it. And it was just, the vision was there for a while, like I was staring into the sun at it. It just stuck with me. It was just ingrained in me, and like I felt like everything was going to be all right. Like no matter what happened, I was going to be okay. And I carry that message of hope that there is a greater thing for us on the other side, but make the best and make it count in this life. And I did not talk about this veiled experience in my book, but I did talk about the STE, the spiritually transformative experience that I had and when I was 15 years old, and the chapter is called I Had a Dream. And basically, what that meant to me and how that helps me be successful in life.
Yeah. And even before your own NDE, you used near-death experiencer stories to illustrate your motivational talks, some of which describe God as an incredible clearness, literally made up of love. I thought that phrase that caught my eye in your book. You write that we are created into this world by love, but that many believe we are governed by two forces, love and fear. And you wrote after that, I think you were, that we are born with two fears, loud noises and falling. But your book also contains a quote from my favorite Psalm 139. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. So if we are created full of fear and full of wonder, as I would interpret that phrase, there must be some essential fears that we're just, as human beings born to deal with. What do you think about that?
That's a very good point, Lee. I appreciate you bringing that up because, yes, I do make the point in my book that really innately what psychiatrists and psychologists believe that we are born with, or some at least in the community of that, believe that we are born with the fear of loud noises and falling, and those are the only, and that's talked about a lot in success literature that I follow, that basically says, hey, the rest of it is learned. Like the rest of it is learned, and something I omitted from the book was a chapter on learned helplessness. Like sometimes where we go through life and can't get through things because we learn to be helpless in things. And those kind of things. And basically, my whole goal with what I talk about is overcoming fear and empowerment. And one of the things that I do with my blog now is calling it, living in empowered peace. And so basically facing your fears, whatever they are in life, and basically overcoming those things to, give glory to God in the highest, and basically overcome fear and live in love.
I wonder if we are born full of fear and full of wonder, that the wonder isn't designed to offset the fear.
Yes, I mean, I like that phrase a lot, and I know I didn't answer your question 100%, of what you were saying, but I think the point I was trying to make with what I was writing was that we should overcome fear. But basically, I think the wonder does conquer the fear. Like I see your point with what you're saying there and where you're going with that, because I think overall things that in life scare us or, frighten us and those kind of things are things that we can overcome with the wonder of what's out there. Like we talk about that a lot in wildlife. Chester Moore, who just came out with a book called Higher Calling, he is the editor-in-chief of Texas Fish and Game magazine that I used to work for. Chester basically would always write articles and columns about what's out there, and I think that's the wonder that you're talking about. Like that's what us NDE experiencers and NDE radio listeners are interested in, is what's in the great beyond,
Right.
And that's what excites me, is just I hold on to every show like with the wonder of a small child, like what's next,
Right. Well, and then of course in Psalm 139, he goes on to say, the writer goes on to say, your works are wonderful. And then he describes how how he was formed, how God formed him in the womb, and in incredible detail for a psalm. It's one of the reasons I love it so much. You write in your book, "You are as unique as they come," and but then you quote Leo Brown, who said, "We are all born an original, but most of us die a copy." Now, what does he mean by that?
So the point is that society tries to teach us to become like everybody else. Like we have to conform to this way, to this society teaches us that we have to become this certain individual that has this, and this, and this, and is this, and this, and this. And I'm just sitting there thinking, Les Brown basically makes the point that, most of us we are all born an original. Most of us go through life a lot of times conforming to what society tells us that we need to become, instead of becoming our own version of our own better version of ourselves. And one of the people that I follow a lot on social and YouTube and those kind of things that I watch a lot of stuff from is Conversations with God with Neil Donald Walsh. And Neil Donald Walsh's whole point is that, the whole goal of living is to become the best version of you that you can become, like to be the best expression of yourself. And that's really where I'm going with my writing and those kind of things that I love to put out there is, be the best version of you, the individual, wonderful, fearfully, wonderfully made person that you are, and embrace your uniqueness, and that love that you have for yourself.
So you don't think that it's an aberration that we would separate ourselves from God to become a unique individual?
Yeah. No, continue.
You got it. You got what I was asking.
Yeah, I do. I mean, basically, I think that we are all like original creations. We are fingerprints. And Steve Gardopy, who you had on the show, is the one I talked about. You had him on the show a few months ago.
Yes, terrific.
And he's the one that got me into NDEs and learning about the other side and learning about Christ and God in just a spiritually transformative way, not in a religious way, just in a spiritual way, because his experience was so profound. But he talked about seeing everything as an incredible clearness on the other side, and that's how he saw God. And so on and so forth. But basically, to answer your question, Lee, I think that the uniqueness that we talk about is the fact that we are, what Steve talks about, and from what he learned from the other side, is that we are all like God's fingerprints. We are all expressions of God's love. And I think that's the thing I lead with when I talk about this kind of subject the most, and what I've learned from what I've spiritually experienced, and then the mystical experiences of other people, is that I've learned that we are all, expressions, that we are all fingerprints, that we are all individual likenesses of the Creator. And I think that's a beautiful, beautiful thing that we need to embrace.
So are we then God's desire to be, fulfilling God's own desire to experience multiple existences? I mean, it's kind of hard to put, ordinary language to something like this, but what is it that drives us to want to be unique in the first place? And when we go back, according to NDEers, we don't really want to be unique. We want to merge with the light. We want to be part of God and Jesus. So what is it that drives us here, down to earth, to be unique?
I love having these conversations. I mean, this is the stuff that I just dream of talking to people about. Yes, I mean, I think that it's a combination of that. Like it's the fact that we are all one, but also that we are individual, like fingerprints and handprints and footprints of God. And that's the vastness of the Creator. That's the vastness of God, is that we are all becoming part of the greater whole that makes up of God. So basically what Steve would say in his experience, and I've gained so much insight from his experience, but basically, how a parent loves a child, how that's an expression of their love with each other, that child is. and how they nurture that child and grow up that child. But that child is not them. That child's an expression of two people melding together to make another human. So I use that kind of analogy, if that makes sense, to use that, is that we're kind of parent-child relationship, that we're all children of God in the respective nature, that we're all unique, but in a way we're all part of the greater whole.
Yes. That's good. By the way, if listeners are interested in finding out more about Steve Gardepee, because he's come up several times in the conversation, just go back into our past shows and listen to the interview. It's fascinating. It's really was an amazing thing that happened over there in Vietnam.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, and the video's got 1.7 million views by this date. So I mean,
I know, and that
not our video, but the video that I did for him. Yeah,
I know, and that was an amazing link. I think that's probably how Lilia found you, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So that has brought you back, into the fold here at NDE Radio. So that was an important event in lots of different ways.
Yeah. And Steve was reluctant to have me record it in the first place, so I'm glad he let me do it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So you write, God has always deeply loved you, and nothing you have done, do, or will do will ever change that. But you also say, assume responsibility for everything you do. So what about the old ideas, the old evangelical Lutheran ideas about sin and judgment?
That's a good question, and that does seem conflicting, I guess, if you look at it in the respective nature of each. But basically, the whole concept that I'm going after, Lee, is the fact that, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, get things accomplished. If you're waiting on God, God's probably waiting on you. And I think that needs to be said. Like, a lot of times, I've got a friend right now that's going through a lot of trouble and family issues and that kind of stuff. And she's like, I'm waiting on God. I'm waiting on God. And I'm like, no. I was like, God's waiting on you. And, I'm just giving that hope and encouragement to take action in the right direction while also trusting in the plan that God has for one's life. And so basically I say both things in the respectiveness of God expects action from us. I think from our end, you can't expect God to do all the work, which is one of my points in the book as well, is that, God will show up when you show up, in your situation, whatever that is, because we all face hardships and we're all going to face more hardships coming forward in life. That's just the nature of life. It was, by the NDEs that I listened to, a lot of times maybe designed to be difficult at times, designed to be challenging. And those kind of times are times that's the truth, if that's the case, for us to rise to the occasion and to take the proverbial bull by the horns, which is what I talk about in my talks that I do for the veterans, and relate them back to NDE experiences.
When you give these talks, do you talk about free will, and how do you understand free will?
So basically, free will is given to mankind, and I love that we're having this conversation, Lee. I got to tell you, this is great stuff. I've lived for having conversations like this. Okay, free will is what we're all given in this existence here. What we do with our life has something to do with our destiny, and whatever you believe about that. Your mileage may vary, but I believe that free will and God's destiny meld together in the respective of that we choose the course, but God chooses the overall plan, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Some NDEers have theorized that we have a hand in deciding what our life is going to be like before we get born, and even up to the point of choosing our own parents. Have you had any thoughts about that?
You had a guest on, I'm trying to remember his name, but a few shows back that talked about Kristen Sundberg. Am I saying that right?
Pre-birth
memories. Yeah. And so basically I thought that was fascinating. I thought that was a great show about, those kind of things, as far as, because I think that there's something to that. A lot of experiencers believe that we have like a soul contract. that we sign off on, that basically, gives us the our parents and all those things going forward to help us, signify the direction of, what we will have, what resources we'll have available to us. And then free will kicks in at that point with what we do with that. So I think that there's some credence to that.
And do you think when it comes to the questions of sin and judgment, that churches are too narrow in their understanding of what that's about?
I've got to be careful about this, but yes.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking, I'll give you a real easy example. There were Christians who saved lives in Germany of the German Jews. They hid them or enabled them to escape from Germany by lying to the Germans about the situation. And of course, there's a commandment, thou shalt not lie. But under those circumstances.
Yeah, I think that there's, for the greater good, for saving lives and for those kind of things, I think that our current church has a lot of rigidity in the respect of just in general speaking terms. And I'm, of the Lutheran faith, which is more the Reformation and that kind of stuff. I'm a big fan of Martin Luther and what he did for the greater good of the church. And the funny thing is the Lutheran church is very similar now to the Catholic Church in a lot of ways that we do things, you know, which is kind of like, I don't know what Martin Luther would say about that. He didn't even want the movement named after him, when he created Lutheranism. But that all being said, I think that, we could be a little more open-minded, but it's kind of like a parachute. You don't want to be too open-minded to where none of the air, keeps you from free falling. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. You want to make sure that you're open-minded to the respect that air can pass through and whatnot, like there's a hole in the parachute kind of thing, but that you want to make sure that you're not free falling either. So there's a balance. And I think that the church could be more open-minded as a whole. I think that overall things, could be better realized with the point I've made all the time with your show is that the Bible is made up of mystical experiences. People have mystical experiences every day. Your show is a good example of that. You can't just say that the only mystical experiences that ever counted happened in the Bible. I'm sorry. I know many people may disagree with me there, but I just think that there's some credence to the fact that people are having these mystical, amazing experiences every day. And, this show is one reason why I tune in all the time, because I want to hear, I want to know what God's up to.
Yeah. And God is still speaking. It seems clear to me that
That's
God,
my point.
he spoke to those gifted writers who put the Bible together. Hopefully he spoke to the people that wound up editing it, under the church fathers' narrow-minded thinking sometimes.
Yes, you and I agree on that one.
There's always still the question of reincarnation, which Christianity says does not exist, but did say it existed up until about, the fourth century. So I was going to say also, we don't have to go to reincarnation, but my wedding ring is a replica of Martin Luther's wedding ring. And I'll have to show it to you in person sometime, but there's Jesus crucified. There's the cross, the sword, mm-hmm. and the whip on either side of him. There's even a little character down below who is gambling for Jesus' garments.
For his lot, for the lot of his garments. Yeah, this is amazing. Wow, I had no idea.
On the other side, there's the Jacob's ladder.
Oh wow!
And the thing they whipped him with, and then there's a red stone on top for his blood.
That's beautiful.
And that was probably Martin Luther designed it himself, or had at least gave the ideas to someone who did that.
I did not know about such a thing. That's really cool. That's really cool. And I've been a Lutheran for most of my life. So.
Yeah, my wife is was raised Lutheran too.
Cool.
Missouri Synod, a little stricter than the evangelicals, but. I'm sure
bit. Not as strict as the Wisconsin Synod, though. That's some other ones, but anyway, that's okay. That's another story for another time.
Listen, you write, we become what we think about, which I know is true. And also, your thoughts govern your actions. So what does this do to people who, say, have PTSD?
So, traumatic experiences certainly have an impact, and PTSD is a good example of that. So the main thing that I think that we can do, to help people with PTSD is help to just encourage. And this is one thing I'm really big about with the veteran work that I do with Crosswater Outfitters, my fishing ministry, is, we just finished an event this past weekend, and there's a lot of soldiers there with PTSD. And I just try to encourage the ones I can have one-on-one time with, that, you're loved, that there's hope, that you've got to think, you've got to, go to your therapy, go to the things that can help, reform and help your mind process through what you went through. And I think that's the best plan, is to get help, and have that, there's just so much depth to what PTSD can mean to somebody. So, I go back to, Paul, and I'm paraphrase the be reformed by the transforming of your mind, phrase in the Bible. That's where I'm drawing that from, is basically the what we think about is what we become. So basically, guard your thoughts well, is my point. And PTSD and those kind of things are somewhat the exception, because those are traumatic experiences. But at the same time, the best we can do to train our mind and to shape our mind for the greater good is the better choice. And sometimes that's not always possible with severe PTSD. But at least the attempt is being made, with those that have it.
There's been a lot recently about the evils of Facebook. Hate to bring it up when you're doing the Facebook page for us, but
that is okay.
But how it's manipulated children, especially, and young teenagers, whose suicide rates are getting right up there with soldiers with PTSD, and teenagers who are being slighted or attacked by their friends on Instagram and through Facebook. I would think that getting kids and those who are suffering from mental illness away from the social media for a while and out into nature, which is what your focus is on, and what your vision of Jesus with the wild animals was about, would be a real path to helping bring people's thoughts back to and their actions back to a healthy state.
Yes. And I think, one thing I try to do with my own son, because he loves to watch TikTok and Instagram and like do little video reels and those kind of things. And I encourage his creativity and those kind of things. But, we have kids that are internalizing the kind of peer pressure and these kind of things, and pressures that you and I didn't have as children. Yeah. Things that are really, really, really tough to deal with and process through because of social media. So I guess it's kind of a loaded weapon. I mean, basically, it can be a tool used for good, for something like NDE Radio, or something that can be used for bullying or peer pressure and things like that. So I think having a break from it, limiting time on it, those kind of things, which I need to do a better job as a dad on, and basically talking to your children and having your children be able to feel comfortable enough to come to you with those kind of things, to basically say, hey, if you have anything that comes up on social media or something that bothers you, then you need to come and talk to me about it. Like, I'm here for you, And I think if parents were a little more accessible and understanding in some cases, and I'm not saying not all of them aren't, but I think that some of this could be avoided as far as the tragedies that we see in social media.
Yeah, I was thinking even possibly funding the VA to take soldiers and military who've suffered trauma out to the national parks, for instance. Yes. Giving them an extended tour of some beautiful area. As Psalm 139 says, your works are wonderful, and even if they're not religious, they're going to have to acknowledge that the creation that
yes.
Where we've preserved it is wonderfully healing.
And to your point about getting back to nature, because I know that was kind of the aim of your question. Basically, I think getting kids outdoors, because I say this a lot, and when I had a podcast for many years, I would always say kids that hunt and fish don't steal and deal. And that's something that was on a bumper sticker one time, and I've carried that with me the whole time. Kids that hunt and fish don't steal and deal. And a lot of times that's true. They're busy engaging with something that is of value to them about, nature and being connected in a meaningful way to the flora and the fauna, and getting to learn about how life is put together, what natural resources we have at our disposal, and those kind of things. And I think that would combat some of this that's going on in our world today.
Mm. You write, no one cares about you more than God, but you also wrote you are a product of your own system, which I guess is reflecting a little on what we were just talking about. But does God have a better system for us to follow? And if so, how do we put people in touch with it?
So, I mean, a lot of people would say the answer to that would be the Bible. And I think the Bible has great resources. I've heard from a lot of near-death experiencers that the Bible is, in a way, and I don't say this out of judgment of anything, but sometimes, not the entire picture of all that God has to offer. And so it should be used, but not used as the sole purpose of, oh my goodness, if it doesn't say it in the Bible, it didn't happen. So basically what I'm saying there with the book is, and the statements that I make in the book is that, nobody cares about you more than the Heavenly Father, God. But the next in line is yourself. Like, you need to care about yourself, and you become a product of the system that you put in place for yourself with free will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
You've really read that book. I'm really impressed. I mean, these are great questions. Like, I've always hoping somebody would ask me.
Well, you've got a list of facts I was going to get into, and one of them actually goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Base your actions on value and true reality. One of the problems with the social media is that it's distorting true reality. People don't know what's real anymore when they believe, they read so many lies, so artfully constructed that They're losing track of reality. And as they lose track of reality, I think they're losing track of what God intends for us.
There's a documentary, I believe it's on HBO Max or whatever they call the network now. It's called Fake Fame or Fake Famous. I can't remember exactly the name of it, but it's a documentary about, they took a group of people that basically were somewhat like had 1,000 Instagram followers or social media followers or whatever, and bought them likes and bought them shares and bought them followers. And they did kind of an experiment on what it did to their psyche and what it did to their self-esteem. Like, these guys were like, but then they realized at the end that it was all fake. Like, it was all just manufactured. You could buy likes, you can buy followers. I mean, there's tons of bots out there that can do that. And so the point is that, to be Insta famous or, and I wrote an article about this. You got people that are on social media that are mile wide and an inch deep. To use an old phrase, they're a mile wide and an inch deep. And that being the case, it's discouraging that a lot of the stuff that you see out there is manufactured. It's not reality. Yeah. And my whole goal is to bring people back to, don't listen to that. Don't get caught up in saying that I've got to have this to be happy. I've got to have happiness is an inside job. Right? Happiness is not in the external things. It is in the internal things. And it is not in what you have. It is in the intrinsic value of who you are in God's love. And it took me years to understand that. But actually, Lee, and I talked about the compliments to your show a lot, but your show has helped me realize that through the guests that you've had on, that it's not something to chase after. It's something to own yourself and to be in your present mind. Happiness is a choice, in other words.
Yeah. And for some, it seems like an almost impossible choice. When we talked earlier or the other day, really, I mentioned Al Franken's routine on Saturday Night Live. Yeah. Stuart Smalley being the self-motivating
Affirmations, yeah.
Affirmations.
Big about affirmations, yeah.
Yes.
I remember that.
Ending up with, and people like you. But there are
people like me, yeah.
That's
that.
right. And it's, whenever I hear, well, I won't say whenever, because some psychologists are quite good at what they do, but an awful lot of them, without drawing on any kind of spiritual source, sound like Stuart Smalley to me. They're trying to bring their patient to a point where they self-love themselves without anything to draw on except themselves, which is almost like, it's like going to an empty well for water at the wrong time. So if there's some way that psychologists and psychiatrists who are famously adverse to faith-based religion could be drawn back into finding some kind of a spiritual source for that kind of energy, I think they would have a much better luck at motivating people to heal themselves. If they could.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I see your point with that, and I was just going to say, happiness is temporary, joy is eternal. Like, that's what we're after, is the feeling of joy. That's where I'm going with that is with what I've learned from the other side, what I've learned from your show and the experiences that people have shared here of over 400 shows, I guess it's been, is that joy is the thing that you should be shooting after, to feel, like, to live, and not to pump yourself up artificially like these psychiatrists and psychologists are doing with just secular stuff, but with the spiritual nourishment, like a spiritual food. In fact, your last guest that you had on, or one of the last guests that you had on, David Rose, am I saying that right?
Yes.
David, he talked about actually going into a table and getting fed and, like, spiritually nourished, like taking the food into his body. And I'm just like, yes. I listened to that on the way down to where I am today. And I thought about that, and I said, that's what we all need, is some spiritual food. Like, we just need some spiritual nourishment, because life just takes it out of us. And I mean, life beats you up, and life just kicks you when you're down sometimes. And I mean, we all need that hope. And what my whole goal is, and something that I wrote down to say, is my whole goal with the work that I do with the soldiers, the work that I do with, the devotion, motivational speaking, Facebook videos, whatever I've done in the past, is to give people hope by the spoonful, just in small little iterations, just small steps of hope. And that's what I hope to do with this book, was give people just encouragement that, hey, reading this is going to make your life just a little bit more understandable, see God's plan more clear, and so on and so forth. And although you've brought up some things that, may sound contradictory in the book, the whole point I'm trying to make is just there's hope in all circumstances, and just keep going forward and keep making progress.
Right. Yes, I thought that spiritual food that he described as light was really an amazing thing, because you don't think about a bodily function like eating, taking something, that nourishes you into yourself when you're already on the other side. But Jesus, of course, described and grossed out a lot of his followers, almost described himself in terms of cannibalism, unless you eat my body and drink my blood. And they all said, whoa, because of course cannibalism in Judaism is a very repulsive thought. But he's talking about truly absorbing what he was into ourselves, and that light image not only was a lot cleaner, David Rose's image, and a lot more easily digested, if you will.
But, in multiple ways, right?
Yeah, in multiple ways. But it was that make it so much a part of yourself that you are consuming it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to imagine it is just in one day at a time, one moment at a time. One thing that's really close to me is a serenity prayer, the whole serenity prayer. Accepting hardships is a pathway to peace, enjoying one moment at a time, living one day at a time. And those are the kind of things that I use in my life, to keep me moving forward and just living in empowered peace, as I call it. And basically the fact that everything's going to be okay, everything is as it is, as it should be, that kind of reassurance, but also realizing no matter what odds I face, I'm going to persevere and move forward and make progress and do the best I can with the resources I have available to me.
Yeah, talk about the extended Serenity prayer a little more, because I didn't realize that there was a longer version of it myself.
Yeah, so it was written for a different purpose, but basically I don't have the whole thing memorized, but the whole point is, everybody knows the first part of it. God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That is spoken at most Alcoholic Anonymous meetings, Al-Anon meetings, so on and so forth, for the people that are affected by alcoholism. That's spoken at the end of every meeting, that prayer is. The rest of it is profound. Like the rest of it, I encourage the listeners to go check out, because it is really a just solid look at dealing with reality as it comes. So basically, enjoying one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, or, accepting one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships is a pathway to peace. Taking the sinful world as Jesus did, not as I would have it, but as it is. Now I'm paraphrasing, but not as it is, not as I would have it. May I be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever and ever in the next. That's the paraphrase of how the rest of the prayer goes. Okay. And that's profound. Like I saw the first prayer, the first full version of that prayer that I hadn't seen before, in a very timely case, because I had lost my job this past November of 2020. I was laid off, and that spoke volumes to me that night when I saw that Serenity prayer, and I reposted it, and it's been a part of my life ever since then, because it takes us from accepting the way that we would like to have things versus the way that things really are, and being a realist and dealing with reality as it is.
In another part of the book, you say you don't have to be a millionaire or a sports star to be successful. And in fact, becoming a millionaire or a sports star can be, anathema to true success, because you get so caught up in the ego and the glory of it that you lose track of better values. So talk a little about how you could be motivational to someone, or how you are motivational to people without encouraging them to necessarily become financially successful.
So, that's a great question, Lee. And basically what I'm intending to do with a case like, it's not all about stuff. It's not all about, what you have. It's about who you are in Christ. For me as a Christian, it's about who I am in God as a spiritual believer. It's about who I am, not what I have. Like so much of our society puts value on things that we acquire and more. The disease to please and the disease of more is what I call it. And that's been identified by a bunch of other writers and everything that have done that, so I won't go into detail there. But basically, the fact that doing the best you can with what you have, with the resources you have available to you, is a success in and of itself. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's the best you can do. Like, what else could anybody expect of Lee Witting or Dustin Warncke or anybody else than to do the best you can with what you have available to you, and not being concentrated on, I've got to have $1 million. I got to be a rich and successful Instagram star, because we have a whole world of people that are Insta famous. And like I used the phrase earlier, a mile wide and an inch deep, they have no depth to them. They're shallow, individuals, and they fake most of their fame to just get likes and followers. And I've dealt with a few Instagram influencers, and that's really what they're the best known for, is being an Instagram influencer. And I'm like, what's the value in that? What value are you giving back? Later in the book, I also talk about the fact that we have people that live lives that, they don't have time to volunteer at the food bank, but they do have time to binge watch another Netflix series. And they don't have time to give money to the homeless shelter or the food bank, but they have money to give to, another Amazon impulse buy. It's about priorities, right? And so I'm not trying to make anybody feel guilty, but at the same time, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have fun with your money, but what I'm saying is that, like, the world needs help too, and we should give of ourselves to become givers, to become like in God's image. That's the whole purpose of giving, in my humble opinion, is to become like God, Christ-like, Buddha nature, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Here's a final question. You wrote, "My journey with God has taken me to many new places in my life." Are there any places that you haven't talked about that you could tell us about?
So, I mean, I've done work with another ministry, which is Camp Agape, which is a bereavement camp for kids. That's another place that I've given, a lot of just this love and mentorship and those kind of things is what they call as a buddy, as a mentor for the kids, and spoonfuls of hope, like just the fact that everything's going to be okay. We remember the loved one as they pass away. So, I mean, it's situations like that. Crosswater Outfitters for the fishing ministry and the soldiers and international students. Camp Agape is work that I've done with kids ages 7 to 12, bereavement camp here in Texas. And just, the work that I've done with trying to encourage my friends on Facebook with personal things that I've done. Just those kind of things, just trying to make the world a better place in my own way. That's the basic summation of what I'm trying to do is hope by spoonfuls, but also make the world, just that much better, with my life.
Well, I have to thank you for what you've done for NDE Radio and along with Lilia and creating the Facebook page and providing other windows to, things like Mother Teresa and Little Prayer. I mean, something that if someone hit on it on the right day for them, it would mean a whole lot. And so I appreciate that part of your spoonful that goes to NDE Radio, because I think it's really made a difference and brought a lot of people to the full collection of our shows on YouTube as well. Dustin, I think we're pretty much out of time. And I want to thank you for your service to those who need to hear that God truly loves them personally, as well as all the creatures, all the wild creatures in the natural world. Tell the listeners how they can learn more about your writings and your ministry.
Sure. My book, I'll hold up for the video here, is available on Amazon. It's called An Intentional Optimized Life. We'll have links for it on the Facebook page and maybe elsewhere. But I have everything on my website. It's kind of a hub of all things Dustin, at dustinsprojects.com. That's all one word, two S's, dustinsprojects.com. You can email me through that website. I have my email clearly on there. I have links to the book and all my other books. I've written a lot of books for the outdoor industry. I wrote a sales and marketing ebook. Wrote a book on how to start an outdoor TV show, because I've done that, and all the hunting ranch and guiding, marketing handbook, all those kind of things. And actually, those two affirmation mentions books, those are the ones I wrote during my greatest depression. Like, those were the hope I was giving to others, and I look back at those with fond memories. That wow, that got me through a really tough time. Those two ebooks that I wrote back then in 2013. But hope abounds. Life is worth living, and giving your best shot with the cards that you're dealt is the whole point of my latest book. But yeah, I'm easily accessible. You can find me. I don't have any hidden profiles or anything. I have a public page on Facebook as a public figure page. I'm not an Insta follower, I promise. But I have an Instagram account at Dustin's Projects, Twitter account, and so on and so forth. I don't do a ton in those other social channels, but I do a lot on Facebook. So you can certainly connect with me if you have any questions or want to order the book or any of that. I'd be honored to connect with your listeners.
Well, that's terrific. Thank you so much, Dustin, for this. I think this has been a really interesting show. And just to go back to the thing you just mentioned, that when you were depressed, you found the solution to that depression by writing to others about the hope that they should be finding. So it's like when you give, you receive, and that's the healthy approach to healing ourselves through God. Listeners, if you'd like to hear this show again or any of our more than 400 archived NDE interviews, go to TalkZone's NDE Radio site and hit the past shows button, or subscribe to our YouTube channel, NDE Radio with Lee Witting. where you can listen and comment on the complete NDE Radio library. And be sure to like, follow, and share Dustin and Lilia's new NDE Radio Facebook page, and discover our Facebook group and links to our YouTube channel while you're there. And listen again next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern at Talk Zone for more NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting, saying thanks for listening.